everybody. Before we jump into today's episode, we have two sponsors we want to say thank you to for supporting this show. The first one is Routine. You guys have heard me talk about Routine, honestly, back from the early days of the podcast, and it's still a product I use every single morning. They have a prompt for me here. I'm going to do a little impromptu on this ad read today because honestly, this is a product that I truly believe in. And so I'm just going to tell you guys exactly what I think and why. First and foremost, this is a stat that they shared, but when you sleep, you lose between a pound and a pound and a half of water. And most of that's just sweating while you sleep. I used to not know if that was actually true, to be honest. I felt like a pound to a pound and a half of water seemed like quite a bit while I slept. But the one thing I did constantly pay attention to when I started using Routine was just the fact that before using Routine, I always felt a little dehydrated in the morning. And I'm one of those people that when I get up really early usually. I work out. One of the first things I do is some form of fitness. It's just like what I do before everyone's awake. And so it's very easy for me to grab a coffee, pre-workout, an energy drink, something with caffeine in it, and just go. When I am good about using Routine, first, I basically they come in these little single serve packets. They contain half an organic lemon, a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, Himalayan sea salt, all 6 essential electrolytes, and they have no sugar in them at all. A lot of hydration products are going to have sugar. So one of the things about Routine that I love is that there's no sugar in there. So when I am good about doing this consistently, I will take one of those single serve packets, I'll throw it in my mixer bottle, and whether I also put in a pre-workout or something with caffeine or I just drink that separately, I try to drink that first. And the days I do that, I do genuinely feel hydrated and just have a different form of clarity all morning. A lot of people have tried to make their own homemade versions of Routine, right? You see people they take a shot of the apple cider vinegar, they put a little sea salt, a little lemon in a drink. This is essentially that, but in a product that you can take with you on the go, have it ready for you first thing in the morning. I know me personally, when I'm groggy rolling out of bed, the last thing I want to do is, squeeze a lemon, cut lemons up, go get the apple cider vinegar, find my sea salt. I just rip this packet open, throw it in my water, drink it, and it's good to go. You can try yours today. If you haven't tried it yet and you've been listening to this podcast for years, just try the damn Routine. Give it a shot. You can use code ShaneWhite30 and get 30% off your first order. So you get 30% off by using code ShaneWhite30 and go to yourroutine.com. To make it even easier, I've added the link to yourroutine.com in the show notes. So just click on the show notes for this episode, click on the link to yourroutine.com, and don't forget to use code ShaneWhite30. All right, guys, today's episode is also brought to you by NeuroRoast. Again, I'm going to go a little off script here. NeuroRoast is a product that I also came across during this year of 2023. They are a coffee company that's helping you optimize your brain function and overall well-being. This is another product that, to be honest with you, when I first started working with it, I was a little on the fence. I was like, do I really want to have mushrooms in my coffee? Well, folks, I will tell you, when I use NeuroRoast, one of the things that has stood out to me the most is I'll back up. People that know me know that I have way too much caffeine, typically. One of the things this year I've done a good job of is cutting out alcohol. Not completely, but predominantly, I don't touch a lot of alcohol anymore. What I think I've actually done the other way, though, is add a lot more caffeine. So I do definitely drink too much caffeine. That's something I need to work on next year, is to try to minimize how much of that. But NeuroRoast is something that has actually helped me because of the way they've formulated their coffee. Like, unlike regular coffee, which is, still something I consume, but NeuroRoast specifically doesn't cause jitters or crashes. Mushroom coffee provides more balance and sustained energy, allowing you to stay focused and productive throughout the day. So the times I do use NeuroRoast, I'll be honest, I just don't feel that jittery, like, I'm jumping out of my chair or standing here at my desk jumping around feeling. So give NeuroRoast a try. They have some really good flavors. I'll be honest too, the two guys that started NeuroRoast are just really good dudes based out of New York, and they're hustling, and hopefully they can get some people to try NeuroRoast this holiday season by listening to this podcast. So for you folks who've been on the fence, I'm telling you, it tastes delicious. They've done a fantastic job of making this coffee not only be functional, but taste fantastic. And if you want to try NeuroRoast, you can use code ShaneWhite. So it's super simple, just ShaneWhite at checkout. you'll also get 30% off. So if you go to neuroroast.com, and once again, I have added that to the show notes. So just click into the show notes while you're listening to this episode. You can click on NeuroRoast link directly. Don't forget to use code just Shane White, and you'll get 30% off your order. Hope you guys love both these products. I'm trying to not only bring you guys products that I use, but that I believe in on the podcast. I'm not taking ad reads for any brands that I don't really believe in. So anyway, hope you guys love both those products, yourroutine.com and neuroroast.com. I've added those links to the show notes. I hope you guys love it. And I got an awesome guest coming up right after this. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Shane White Show. I am pumped today. This guy I have on the podcast today started a brand. Peter, I think I bumped into you guys on LinkedIn a long time ago and was just really intrigued by the story. So I reached out and really wanted to have you on to hear more about it and share it with my audience. For everyone listening, Peter Frelinghuysen. Is that close? Did I get close?
That's close enough. Better than most.
Oh, I was telling Peter before the podcast that that might have been the hardest last name I've had, and I've had some doozies on here. Peter, for everyone listening who doesn't know you, you started Earth Brands, and I think what most people probably, if they've heard of you or seen you, Earth Cups was like the first product that really, I think, got a lot of notoriety. But for everyone listening who has no idea who you are, doesn't know what the brand is, could you give everyone just a little bit of an intro into you and what you're building?
Yeah. Well, not too much background on me. I'm from New York City. Grew up playing tennis, which is how I met my co-founder. Went to school up in the Berkshire Mountains in Massachusetts. And became more and more involved and kind of concerned about plastic pollution in the environment. And then with my best buddy, Misha, who also played on the tennis team with me in college, started, back then it was just called Earth Cups. Now it's Earth Brands, from our dorm room, our junior year. And the idea was pretty simple. We wanted to replace the Solo Cup for college kids with a more sustainable alternative. A plant-based, bio-based, compostable version. And today our business looks a little bit different than it looked back then when we sold mostly D2C to college, kids and fraternities and universities. Today we're mostly in food service selling B2B. But fundamentally we haven't changed that much. We still want to replace all the plastic out there with better alternatives. And we still want to have fun and make sustainability cool doing it.
I love that, man. And it's funny. I know, I've heard this online from you guys, but would love for everyone listening to get a sense of it. It's something that's, I'm sure if anyone was in college that's listening to this, everyone has a similar story where you've been at a fraternity party or you've been at a party at a house in general, and you just see the unbelievable amount of red Solo cups. And it's funny because I heard you explain that. And I honestly, I went to Purdue and I had countless nights seeing all that. And I don't know if I ever really stopped to think about like what that means for the environment at scale. So what if we could, like, just to kind of go back to the beginning. I mean, again, I always like on here to explain to folks, right? Like you saw something that most people have seen at some way, shape, or form in their life, but you actually acted on it. Do you remember like the first conversation where you were kind of like, what the hell's going on with this red Solo cup thing? I'd love for you just to dive into kind of like the initial concept.
Yeah. I'm not sure there was a one single light bulb, but there were kind of two in a way. So, the first was we went to Williams College, which is in Williamstown, Mass. It has a small population of a few thousand people. It's beautiful. It's nestled in the Berkshires. It's green everywhere you can see. And we would walk our sophomore year. We lived quite far away from the tennis courts, but we would walk, to practice together every day, a good 15-minute walk. And our walk kind of took us right down the main street at Williams, where students lived off campus and where a lot of the parties were thrown. And we'd walk down that street and we'd see, red Solo cups, cheap plastics and stuff littered around, beer cans too, of course. And it kind of always bothered us. I think it stood out on the, what was otherwise a very beautiful green campus. And so I think that was like part A or part one. And we talked about it a few times on a couple of those walks. Like, oh, what a shame. These guys should clean that up. Or, I think we even tossed them out ourselves. Right. And then the second piece of it was we had taken some more classes on, environmental science and stuff like that, and even the economics of climate change. And then we volunteered for a program. It was an orientation program that same fall for incoming students, where we taught them about what was compostable, what was recyclable, and what was landfill. And Williams was ahead of the curve. They still are, right? They're a very sustainable campus, had composting, recycling, different bins in every dorm, every student building. And so as part of that orientation thing we learned about the different materials, different plastics. We learned that not all plastics are created equal. And we learned that there is such a thing, we didn't even know they existed, as bioplastics, right? We didn't invent them. They've been around for a few decades, but they're still a very tiny, tiny subset of the plastic, umbrella. And so that was kind of the second light bulb moment, where we took that like feeling of, this doesn't feel great to walk down this street and see red cups littered everywhere. And then, wait a second, there's a better material out there, but we can't buy cups, at the liquor store or at even a big grocery chain, where that are compostable or plant-based.
And why do you think back then, why was that a thing? Was it just there was the bigger companies that make the plastic solo cups, for example, they just didn't think there was a demand for it, or price, or do you know now that you
Yeah, I
look
mean, I
back?
think I think I think it's a couple different things. Definitely those two that you mentioned, right? I mean, I think they probably have or had and still have better margins and whatnot, selling cheap plastics, right? When you can make a cup for a cent or two and then go
Sure.
sell it for 7 or 8, right? There's a lot of money to be made. Um, and I think the bioplastics were still relatively new in like the history of plastics. And I think back 15, 20 years ago, even 5, 10 years ago, when even when we were getting going 4 or 5 years ago, people were wary of bioplastics, right? They're like, oh, do those melt? Or are those like the paper straws? Like people are a little wary of sustainable products in how they perform. They assume that there's some trade off on performance. So I think that was kind of one other piece. But even over the last decade or two, as a percent, and it's still small, but bioplastics are growing hugely. So that's obviously something we're very excited about, right? We're building the demand. We're a small piece of it, but we're helping that growth. And we generally, it's funny, we don't see the bioplastics manufacturers out there as our competitors as much as we see the plastics companies as our competitors, right? We do think, that they can help us rise. We can help them rise. There's an education component to it, and of course a regulation and kind of national one too.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. That's cool. It's a cool concept to have too, because then it's like you can raise everybody up that's kind of trying to build a cleaner, better world. Do you back to the kind of the origin story, which is a big part of what I would love to focus on. I could totally see, and I'm sure you remember some of those initial early conversations with your co-founder. What was it's such a big leap to go from, hey, I have this, I hate seeing these cups on the street littered everywhere, to, hey, let's go try to start a manufacturing business where we make, cups. That's such a big leap to make. You guys are sitting there junior year. How did you go about doing this? Where'd you start? How did you even make like the first prototypes?
Yeah. Well, we certainly didn't we had the vision of, hey, let's replace everything, but we didn't understand what that meant, right? That's kind of the funny piece I always cling on to. Like, we had this big dream and big vision of where we wanted to go, but we had no clue what that actually entailed. So in the early days, actually COVID kind of hit. We had the idea, a couple months went by, school, we were researching, we were interested in it. And then COVID really hit, and we were obviously sent home from school and had a little
Mhm.
extra time on our hands. And that was when we started spending more time on the project. And that's really what it was. It was a project. We weren't like, hey, this is a business or what we're going to do after we graduate. It was just like, hey, can we make something out of this? And yeah, we started with our best friend Google and started just researching, hey, what's out there, right? Can we buy from someone? And we realized there weren't many manufacturers in the U.S. Out there, period, who worked with bioplastics, and there weren't very many who were willing to work with us, right? Just two young college kids saying, hey, we want to slap a cool logo on a cup and try to sell it to college kids. And so we found some overseas. We got samples from maybe 6 or 7 of them. Those took months, right? It was COVID.
Yeah, sure.
We also just didn't have any buying power, so no one was excited to work with us. We really had to convince them and sell them on this dream a little bit. And eventually, we got some prototypes, kind of towards the end, maybe of 2020 and into 21. We kind of landed on our favorite, redesigned it a little bit visually, and then placed our first order of 100,000 cups, which back then
Wow.
it sounded like
That's pretty. It sounds like a big. That sounds like a lot. Yeah.
But if you know cups, if you're in the cup industry, which is funny to say, or disposables, you know that 100,000 is a drop in the ocean. So we ordered those actually with some money that we had made off our startup company. Misha and I had done our freshman year. Ordered those. They came in the spring of 21, and that's when we started selling.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, 100,000 sounds like quite a bit. Was that like? I always love this part of the story. I mean, was that a ton of money for you guys back then? Like from
yeah, it
just
was.
like the initial PO. It seems like a lot.
It was. We were also like, we didn't have a business plan or a distribution plan. We didn't have a warehouse. We didn't have anything set up. We were just like 100,000 cups. We didn't even have a sense of like how many physically that was. Like, how much space is it going to take up? Can we fit this under our bed or in a warehouse? We had no clue. And
Sure, yeah.
obviously it was somewhere in between, right? It turned out being Misha's mom's garage. That was our first warehouse. And
that's funny.
Build it to the roof. They barely fit.
Did you at least know that's where you were sending the product? Did it go there?
Yeah, it went straight there. We had more of a fiasco for the second shipment, which I'm happy to talk about. But the first 100,000, we said, hey, let's try to fit them all in the garage. We did a little mental math. We said, okay, a case is this big, you can stack them this high. So we had a sense eventually, but it wasn't super planned out, and we didn't have a big sales plan. It was just like, hey, let's text our friends at other schools and see if they're buying cups. It was also like still early 2021. COVID was still going on. It's not like there were widespread parties. I think some schools were a little more open than others. Others were completely shut down and had pretty tight guidelines. So we felt like our market was a little crunched, and it was April of the school year. So we had like a month in our heads, right? That was our only market. So we had a month to try to get rid of these cups. And we started selling, to a couple friends, and then we'd hear from friends of friends, and we hear from others. And finally we started selling not just, 50 packs or 200 cups to individuals, but we started selling to fraternities and sororities and sports teams, like organizations, student-run organizations. And I remember that was amazing because obviously they'd buy more. They'd buy 5,000 or 6,000 or 10,000 at a time. But also we would sell to one. Like I remember we sold to one at Cornell in the early days. And the next weekend, we heard from 3 or 4 others at Cornell saying, hey, we saw your cups at so-and-so's party. We also feel guilty about using the red solos, and we also want a compostable alternative. Can we buy some too? And so that was
wow. So you had like word of mouth
almost
immediately.
Word of mouth, exactly. And we kind of like stoked the flames of the word of mouth a little. Like we posted on Instagram, and we got pictures of people, and we sent out some free 50 packs, and like we were relatively strategic, or at least like hustly about it. But the word of mouth definitely helped.
For sure. I mean, I can imagine. Well, what's interesting too, just to even back up one step, is someone who's starting a business, and you place 100,000 cup PO. It's kind of funny, Peter. Like as I'm just sitting here listening to you explain this origin story, it seems like a lot of headwinds all at once. Like I'm thinking back to back during those days of COVID. I've been out of college for a while, but you're trying to sell something that's more expensive to a consumer who typically is under-resourced is like the two things I'm thinking of. And then on top of it, it's COVID and people aren't really partying together as much as normal. So hats off to you guys for being like, with all those, fuck it, let's go, let's do this. Was there kind of like a mentality around that? Like, we think this is going to come back and this is like not going away, this need for to move away from plastic cups?
I mean, I don't think we were that like strategic or thoughtful. Again, it really was just a passion project. But I do think, we've gotten some great advice over the years. And one was, if someone tells you something's hard to do, run towards it, right? Do that thing.
Love that.
Because a lot of other people won't. And I don't think that was exactly what this was. I think it was more a little luck and timing. But I will say that we had some great tailwinds created by all those headwinds. And what I mean was after school kind of ended, end of May, June, school's out, we're not really selling to frats. We were still sitting on like 60,000 cups or something, right? And we needed to move those. And we kind of were like, well, who can we sell these to now, right? We both had internships that summer that were pretty intense. But we realized that there were bars and breweries and places out there who needed single-use, disposable cups. And their normal vendors were paused or out of business or slowed down or, whatever it was because of the whole, COVID situation. And so that was an opportunity, right? And one of our first B2B deals that we landed, who they're still a customer today, 4 years later, they came to us and they were like, we can't get compostable cups anywhere. Those mostly come from China. We'll do anything for 60,000, 70,000. And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, we could sell our entire inventory right now, which would be great. But then, we're sitting around for a month or two till we get more product. And so that was the balance we had to strike a little bit there.
So what'd you end up doing? Like, what'd you do when you had an opportunity like that?
I think we had, let's say 70,000 and we ended up selling them like 50,000. We said, hey, we can't give you everything, but we'll give you 50,000. We struck a deal with them. And honestly, one of the best decisions we made because they've been a great customer since. And then we kind of sat and were a little more selective on the 15, 20,000 that we had left for the rest of the summer, for July and August. There was still a period, I want to say that summer, let's say a 3-week period, maybe July, August, where we didn't have cups. We sold out. We were down to maybe a couple 50 packs that we were saving, but we had sold out and we were just sitting around for another month until that second shipment came in, which was a lot bigger than 100,000 cups and for which we had no plan in terms of storage. Yeah. And that was a bit of a fiasco.
So so this next one, wait, so give me the numbers again. So the 100,000 was the first one. How big was the second one?
Second one was it was a full container. So it was around 700,000 cups.
Wow.
Around there.
Those are not like, it's a massive undertaking, Peter. That's cool as shit. Okay.
It was. And that one, we got ourselves into a bit of a pickle in a few ways. The first was no garage unless it's a 15-car garage can fit those. And we actually, we had most of the money, but we didn't have all of the money to pay for it. So we had enough to get it to the States, but we didn't quite have enough to get it released from customs. And so, so we had to do two things simultaneously, one of which was raise a little money. And it wasn't a lot, but basically, find someone who's willing to put up a little money and then get paid back in a month or two. And we were lucky that took a few weeks of calling around till we found someone. And then the second piece was figuring out where we went with them. And we didn't warehouses didn't want to work with us. We weren't really even a business. We didn't know what we were doing or how to find them. And we also waited till the product was essentially here to problem solve just because, we were idiots. And we ended up renting out, I think, 4 different public storage units at a public storage facility in Long Island and unpacking an entire container by hand, depalletized. So that's 700 cases of 1,000 cups by hand into 4 different storage units. And I think it was probably the first time a storage facility, or at least that one, had a full container pull up with goods to be unpacked.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. I'm sure you guys have some pictures of that. That sounds like one that's got to be on the wall someday.
We do, yeah. We have one of Misha sitting on top of the container.
That's amazing. I mean, that in and of itself, I obviously I'm meeting you for the first time, but that speaks to the two of you, because that takes some balls to go from, sure, filling up his mom's garage. That's a lot of product. But then getting a full container, I mean, that's a massive undertaking. So you're getting these from overseas. Was that like, now you think back on it, I always think for folks who they start something where that's where the most economical place is to get product. Was that like a pretty big undertaking? Like, was that like a hard thing to figure out? I don't know if I've had a lot of people on here that actually source products overseas.
It was, especially when like you didn't know anything about sourcing or pricing or anything, right? There's a language barrier, there's a communication barrier sometimes, right? We had to like download WhatsApp and other things and start, start just kind of negotiating. And then there's just like the general like risk. Like we didn't know, maybe we were sending payment to someone who's never going to give us product. Like we just had no idea, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not shaking someone's hand, you're not touring a facility, especially during COVID, right? So I think there was that added risk. Again, we had gotten samples from them.
Is that what happened though? Like you just have to like wire money basically and hope they ship it kind of
Yeah,
thing?
I think so. I can't even remember how we paid them back then, but I think it was, yeah, I think we wired money.
Wow.
And I think again, it was like a 30-40% deposit or something. And then once the goods kind of landed to get them released from the port, that's when you wire the rest. And so it wasn't like it was a full blind wire up front. I think that would have been a little crazy. But it still felt risky. And, yeah, even, the more we were like, hey, let's buy more, it felt riskier and riskier. We didn't have terms. We didn't have anyone vetting these people. But I will say, I mean, these days with tariffs and whatnot, it's a separate conversation. But China's and other parts that, of particularly of Asia, but really other places in the world outside the U.S. have not just cheaper manufacturing, but really better manufacturing in some ways, and sometimes that's why it is cheaper. And I think for compostables and cups, it's not like it's a very hard process, but it is trickier than plastics. And I do think a lot of those manufacturers are more willing to try things and to use different materials and compostables, whereas again, a lot of the folks in the U.S. were just using cheap plastic. So I always, I applaud. I think we would be nowhere without them, right? No one in the U.S. would work with us for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what's wild to me is it seems like you guys tried to potentially work with someone in the US and then going overseas. That in itself is a big leap. Like I just think in general, I think that's for people listening, that takes a lot of balls, like I said, to go and do that and make the leap. Did at this point, I mean, I know this is only your second major PO, Peter, but at this point, did you kind of feel like, hey, this is a business? Like this can be a business. This is what I want to focus my time on, or is it still kind of a side hustle?
Yeah. I mean, it was still, yeah, I don't know about side hustle because it wasn't even like we saw like, oh, we could make money doing this. It was more like passion project, fun, like thing to do. At that point, we were going into our senior year. So kind of like fun thing to do, during our senior year to kind of, I don't know, get a little experience or have some fun. Maybe our classes had slowed down in one or two respects. But we still, we were full-time students with a tough, workload. We were tennis players, right? We had a busy year tennis-wise. And we also had jobs, right? So we had internships junior year that after junior summer that turned into full-time gigs or supposed to be full-time gigs post-grad.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was in the
Yeah.
back of our heads as, what we were going to do come June.
I give you a lot of credit there. I mean, I didn't play a sport and I feel like I had no time. I mean, I had lots of time. It's funny thinking back now. It's like I wasted a lot of time probably. But was that pretty difficult? Like trying to handle it all, manage it all? It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot on anyone's plate.
Yeah, it was. And again, I think that's why one of the reasons I think having a co-founder is so important, right? It's almost like to keep the energy and the motivation and the discipline and just like the train going in the right direction and staying on the tracks. It's nice to have two people, right? And especially
For sure.
people that complement each other and are a little bit different in their skill sets, which Misha and I are. So, yeah, I'd say it was challenging, but I think growing up playing so much tennis and going to tough schools, we were okay at time management and liked packing in our days and being busy. And so yeah, it's funny. I think back to those days, like they did feel so busy, but at the same time, I had way more free time back then than I do now.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, I never missed going to the bars. It wasn't like I was so busy that I couldn't make it out on a weekend, right? So we all had time. I think it's interesting too. So you guys, you've kind of walked us through how you guys got to what I would call like the first major inventory unload, right? But then in April, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you guys raised a serious amount of money and like Mark Cuban's involved. So like, how do we go from 2021 of getting a container over to leading to a round like that, and then ultimately getting someone like Mark on the cap table? That's a pretty incredible. I would argue like 12 months even
Yeah.
here in the story.
Yeah, well, again, like early on, like honestly, because of that second like container, right, or that second order, we realized, hey, we can't go order more and then just like call around and ask for someone to help us, pay for it and pay them back. Like that wasn't a sustainable way to go. We also knew we weren't making money, right? We were basically buying and selling at cost or like a cent above, but you add in shipping and other stuff that we were paying for. We obviously weren't making money. And so we said, hey, look, let's see if, at that point we've been selling to college kids mostly. The brand was kind of growing. We were building a little bit of a movement on social media. So we said, hey, let's see if anyone, might be interested in this. This kind of over the summer, we had emailed actually Williams alums, so alums of our school. That's where we started. We went through the database. We emailed people saying, hey, we're doing this. Does this sound interesting? Would you talk to us? We're raising some money. We had the idea, I think, to do like a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe or something.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
ended up getting in trouble with the school, of course, because we were soliciting for money on the alumni database, which is like a big no-no. But I will say, like, I think we emailed 3,000 alums one by one.
Wow.
And one by one, it wasn't even automated. 90% ignored us. 8% said, how'd you get my email and why are you asking me for money? Piss off. And then 2% said, hey, this is really cool. Like, I'd love to talk or give you advice or, whatever. And we actually got our first like investment offer that summer from a Williams alum. We didn't end up taking it.
Whoa.
But he ended up coming on board in our next round and the round after, and is still a close, good, investor, advisor, friend today. So that came full circle. But anyways,
Wow, that's cool.
Then that fall, once we were selling and buying and wanted to buy more product, we said, hey, let's raise some more money. We were thinking about, hey, should we manufacture ourselves? Does that make sense? We knew nothing about it, but that was kind of in the back of our heads because we had realized there weren't many people in the U.S. making compostable cups or at least servicing these customers who we were. And so, yeah, we raised some money. Again, it was like the way we landed Mark Cuban and some others. It was pretty lucky. We reached out to angel investors on LinkedIn. That was kind of our go-to. One of whom we had a 10-minute call with, and he said, "This is cool. I'm going to intro you to my friend." That friend turned out to be Mark Cuban, so it was kind of a crazy handoff. And then yeah, from there, filled out the rest of the round. Mostly angel investors, people who Mark knew, people we knew, or just random people on LinkedIn and who were out there. And then, yeah, closed that kind of spring of our senior year.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you also, I'm sure you had no experience fundraising. So how'd you guys even go through that whole process of learning, like, how the hell do we fundraise? How does this work? What documents? Like, do you have to find lawyers? And there's a lot that goes into that. I've been a part of a couple of those.
Yeah. No, 100%. So we had no experience is obviously the short answer. And, it was really trial and error. Like we probably, could have like sat down and learned or done a crash course or like talked to people and then figured it out. But it was really trial and error, and we made a lot of mistakes, talked to people. I think both of us, were okay at sales. And so we understood that a lot of it was about selling our progress and our traction and our vision too, right? What we wanted to do. And then, from there, right, we figured that part out, right? We tweaked it after a dozen conversations, got okay at it. And then from there, reached out to the angel investor who connected us with Cuban and said, hey, I think we need lawyers. Do you have any advice? He said, here's a good firm for startups. So I think it was a combo of just like not being afraid to fail or having people tell us like, no, you guys are dumb, get out of here. But then also pure willingness to always ask questions and also ask help. I think people sometimes aren't afraid to ask questions, but they're afraid to like ask for some sort of positive help. And I think we weren't afraid to do that, which is, it was definitely to our benefit.
You guys, it's funny. I don't know. You might have been told this before. I'd be curious. You guys seem like you didn't set out to be entrepreneurs, but you you embody all of the key characteristics that it takes to be successful in entrepreneurship, right? Like you kind of just you went into it blindly. You guys just didn't waste time doing endless amounts of research. You just kind of figured it out and ran forward, which some of the best entrepreneurs I've had on here, that's kind of a consistent theme, is instead like there's almost this sense of not knowing where you're going is kind of part of the dream and the fun. I mean, raising 2.5 million too, was that something that you guys spent a lot of time thinking about? Because it seems like you guys had demand almost out the gate, and I don't know, it was the funding, was the goal to help kind of get ahead of demand. I always am curious on like the decision to
Yeah.
keep all your equity, bootstrap it,
Yeah.
raise capital.
I mean, I think once I think we didn't really, we weren't savvy enough, or we didn't have any. We also didn't have any money. We were two college kids to bootstrap it ourselves, but and it certainly wasn't profitable. So then it was kind of like, hey, let's raise money. And then once obviously Mark Cuban kind of landed in our lap, we were like,
Wild.
hey, yeah, we should definitely do this, right? You don't want to pass up that
Yeah.
opportunity. And so yeah, I think we weren't that thoughtful about the trade-offs of it. And I think for our second round and now we are much more thoughtful. But we also had good advice and good lawyers and good people, telling us what to do. And again, that's why it's important to ask questions. But we set it up in a way that wasn't too detrimental to us, and had some good safeguards and structures in there, that protected against downside. And did we spend that money on the most like pragmatic, thoughtful things right away? Not exactly. I think we would go back and do a few things differently. But our vision was there. It was probably ahead of where we should have been, but it was there. And yeah, I think today we're okay because of it.
What would you say? I think this could be a really important piece that people today listening could take some knowledge from. What would you say now that you're thinking back on it, Peter? What were some of like the key things, especially when you're thinking about from like a legal perspective? Were there things you learned that you were like, oh, thank God I had a lawyer, or like even advice when it comes to finding a lawyer? I mean, it sounds like you guys got recommended to a really good one, but just curious, because that to me in this story so far seems like that could have been one where, you guys could have, again, found like a cheap lawyer that checked the box to move quick, and it could have
Yeah,
screwed up everything. Right. So
yeah. No,
it seems like you thought through that one.
yeah. I think we got lucky. We got a good introduction. It's something that's hugely important, of course, and something like today I put even more value um, in two ways, right? And how good they are, and how fast they move, right? Because the last thing you want as a startup is to be kind of buckled down by any bureaucratic jumping through hoops and doing a ton of paperwork. So it's always a balance between mitigating risk and moving fast. And again, I think that's you were talking about us being kind of natural entrepreneurs. I think that's also stuff that we do well in terms of balancing each other out, right? Misha's sometimes much more willing to jump without a net, and then I help create the net or figure
Mm,
it out afterwards. Um, but yeah, I think with raising money, we learned a little bit. It's not like we knew everything, but we learned about different structures. An equity round, a convertible note, a safe note, different stuff like that. Got some good advice. We also weren't necessarily in the leverage seat to negotiate like crazy.
sure.
But we did have some stuff going, and we knew some people like Mark were interested, and eventually at the end of the day, I remember we signed physically the papers when we were in the library at college,
Oh, wow.
and that's the only place we could print them out. And I don't know why it wasn't like a DocuSign or something online, but I guess we were old school back then, and we printed them out, and there was a moment of like, geez, like there's almost a weird catch-22 where you're like, once you attract investors or once someone believes in you and wants to give you money, you're like, wait a second, how valuable is this? Is this more valuable than I actually think? Could it be
Yeah,
something
sure.
bigger? Am I selling too much of it? Am I getting screwed up? There are all these doubts that creep up, and then eventually you just have to trust, like, no, this is my vision. Mark and these other people are going to be great partners, and we can grow this to a place that's far beyond what we can even imagine today. Um, and again, I think going back to having a co-founder, not just Misha, who's more risk willing than I am, but just a co-founder period, who you can kind of like hold hands and jump off the cliff with,
Sure.
is,
Yeah.
is sometimes a little helpful. At least your mind, right? At the
Yeah,
very
no. I agree. I mean, it's funny. Like within my business, my co-founder, we always say we're like yin and yang. Like everything he's great at, I'm not, and I think same for him. And I do think some of the best stories that I've had on here too. A lot of them come from like two co-founders that are just complete opposites, and in business that can be such a superpower. It's funny too. I had never thought about that until you were saying it, and that's where my head went too. Is like part of me would be so excited that Mark's involved, and then part of me would be like, if he jumped on this so fast, are we like way undervaluing this? Is he just like, oh, these kids, this is I'm here we go. You
right.
know what I mean? So
No,
that's
totally,
wild. I mean,
totally.
yeah, what a tough thing to wrap your head around, because otherwise you think if you don't get it, if you don't get any bites, especially from someone like him, you're like, oh, we probably overvalued this. But having someone like him on the cap table, I mean, that's fuck, dude. That's one in a million.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
it's
invaluable.
especially back then, it's exactly what you want, right? It's much easier to attract other people, get other people signed up, and have people like, basically commit to his terms and move more quickly, which was important.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure that's like someone you get on there, and then a lot of people would jump, and you can run faster. After you got that, did you guys focus mainly? Were you thinking like B2B is kind of the play? Because I saw then you guys do another round in 2023, which is basically almost double the size of the first one, which is very impressive how fast you guys have raised rounds. And then you become like the official sustainable cup of Madison Square Garden, which being a New York guy, that had to been, I'm sure that was like the coolest thing of all time. Would love for you to explain that, because to me, like it's so cool in your story. Like you guys do have some like monumental milestones that I'm sure were worth celebrating.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, so after we raised that round, we still had to like graduate college and make it through the tennis season. And then, I'd say we were mostly focused on B2B at that point. I can't quite remember, what our sales breakdown was. But it was definitely more B2B than D2C, but we still sold to college. We were still I mean, we still are today, but we're still very focused on college being our brand, right? Our
Okay.
mission is
Yeah.
being connected to that red solo cup in a way, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, Peter, real quick too, like I didn't even think about that. Like you had to finish college, finish tennis. Was there any pressure from your investors? Like, hey guys, you guys should focus on this. So you have something here. I've always wondered in those
yeah,
situations,
no,
was there like pressure to kind of jump to it?
there was, but I think like when we kind of signed those docs and raised that first round, it was almost in a way us telling ourselves like, hey, we're gonna do this full time, and we both did kind of an in between, which I think was fine because it didn't change our mentality about it whatsoever, but we kind of delayed our jobs, right? The jobs that we had lined up, we deferred them. Um,
Okay.
and we're both kind of lucky to have that deferral. And then we said, let's see where we are in a year. Obviously, a year came around, and we were even more excited about the business and wanted to keep going. But I do think definitely the investors like wanted to know like, are you guys all in? And we said, look, we're all in to give this a shot. We want to do it. I think even before we raised the money, it was funny. Like for me, and I don't want to speak for Misha because maybe he's different with this, but for me, like I would hear from friends at college or other places, saying, "Wow, it looks like Earth Cups is starting to get some traction. Like, have you thought about doing that post grad full time?" Even before I had really thought about it, right? I think it was always
Oh,
back in
funny.
my mind, but I was very much in the camp of like, I want to get this to a place where it's as close to a no brainer as possible. And it still wasn't a no brainer. Like we were graduating,
Never
we were
is,
giving up
right?
great jobs for like zero salary, zero benefits, zero anything, just like the two of us. And I think we had like one or two part-time people at the time, to try to grow this thing. And then yeah, and then that was rest of 22. We just kept growing and selling, and then midway through 23, we started raising a little more money, and eventually closed that in like October or so of 2023. And at the same time, we announced our deal with MSG, which again we closed
So
maybe
cool.
in September. So that was pretty amazing, and honestly, it never gets old. It's I won't say it's the one because there's other ones that still get me excited every time I see them. But growing up a New Yorker and a Knicks fan, a Rangers fan, going to the Garden, it's very fun to see our cups there. And actually, I saw some celebs using them at the Knicks game the other day, which is fun.
Cool.
it's almost full circle. We used to Photoshop celebrities with our cups as a joke. It was like oh my God, look,
That's
we're using
funny.
our cups. And now they're
Yeah.
actually using the cups courtside at the Knicks.
Oh, that's hilarious, man. That's so cool. Yeah, I was gonna say like that'd be cool if you got them to see that they were photoshopped a long time ago. Now they're using it. That's great.
Totally.
So wow, that's wild. What was the like once you hit that, once you raise the next round, you're at MSG. I would assume then like what is for everyone listening. I think this is an important piece too. Like on paper and like as I hear this story, it's like, oh wow, this business was crushing. You guys are raising lots of money. You're selling tons of cups. But then you also said there, like, we jumped to this, no salary, no benefits. And I think that's very typical with a lot of stories like this. How does that typically work? How did it work for you guys? Like, how did you think about structuring that? How do you pitch that to investors? Like, how much is okay to make from the business early on? Did you guys think much about that, or was that something you zoomed through? I'm always curious as
Yeah.
someone who
Yeah.
jumped out of college to do it, how you guys thought about it.
We both we were lucky. We're both from New York or New York area. So we both moved back home for, the first kind of year post grad or some time to save on rent and some stuff like that, which certainly helped. And, I think Misha and my mentality was always like, what can we do for the company and not what can the company do for us? So whether that, means sacrificing X or Y or Z or growing it, but also cutting stuff, we were always super on board for that. That was our mentality. Right. And so honestly, it was never and still is never an issue with investors today. We make a salary today, but it's a very modest salary. And yeah, for us, it was, a lot of our kind of growing pains in late 22 into 23, and through most of 23 actually helped kind of like hone our focus on how to like go after the market. And I think that's rare. I think a lot of time growing pains help a company focus on like what they can cut better, what they can do better internally. But
Sure.
for us, it was actually like, wow, importing products, and the bigger we get, the more we import, and the more it's custom products for bigger customers. The more we grew that way, the more it created working capital issues and cash gaps, and all these different things that you don't even really know about or learn about. You think all growth is good growth, and you don't think about slowing down growth. You don't think about managing, working capital and that sort of thing when you're just like selling and excited and growing the business, and you want to say yes to everything. And so I think that helped hone our focus on, hey, we need to make stuff in the States. We need to, service our customers better. We need to do it more, sustainably as a company. It was just kind of this multitude of things, which again, we don't have all figured out today, but we've certainly, trended in the right direction relative to our growth, in how we operate on that scale.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you guys, it sounds like those little things you just hinted at. I've been in businesses, especially I'm mainly in the food and beverage space, so kind of a cousin to what you guys are doing. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So I'm sure it's something that'll continue to be complicated as you keep growing. But it sounds like as everything so far in your story has been, you guys have figured it out. As we get close to the end of the time, Peter, one of the questions I love to ask every founder that comes on here is just basically summarizing the tools you use. So from like mapping out Earth Brand's macro long-term goals all the way down to like what Peter wants to achieve this year, all the way down to the shit you got to get done today. Are you a pen and paper kind of guy? Do you have apps? What tools do you surround yourself with to be the best founder you can and ultimately just to get shit done?
So like actual working tools, like what am I using?
Yeah, like today, like what exactly? Like do you have like a notepad with you? Are you a planner guy? Do you have apps?
Yeah,
What's your system?
I'm not a pen and paper guy anymore. Although I love writing, so I should get back to that. But no, I'm Google Calendar is my kind of ride or die number one. I have everything on there. I basically book out my life to this point.
Are
Which
you yeah, are you a time blocker?
I'm a time blocker, yeah. So I block,
Okay.
I block, I don't block like when I sleep and stuff like that. I think that's a little next level, but it's more like, have to go here to there, I got to do it. Or if I have to do a task, I even put in there. And then obviously all my meetings, all my, trips, whatever, stuff like that is in there, travel. But yeah, definitely reminders are in there as well. I'm someone who, I never thought of myself as forgetful, but when you're juggling so many things, you have a lot going on upstairs. Some stuff slips out. So
Yeah.
Google Calendar for sure. And then, we have a CRM system that, on the sales side definitely is kind of my truth, right? I mean, it's all of our truth. Like, we use it both for deals and closing deals and sending out proposals, but also as a project management tool. So it has like built-in tasks and reminders and stuff like that. So I use that, and then we use that CRM for different KPIs. We also have our own ERP system that we built out, which
Oh,
we're
nice.
starting to build some more like project management functionality into. So like a shared calendar, shared drive, stuff like that. But yeah, for me, it's mostly calendar. I use notes a little bit, like just notes on my phone or on
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
computer.
That's a
Um, yeah,
secretly powerful app. I use Notes a
it
lot.
is. Yeah, it is. It's just like you can get anything and everything just down there. And then let's see what else. Yeah, that's most of it. I use, I use text in like crazy. I mean, I feel like I send out a million texts a day, so I'm on my
Okay.
phone too
Yeah.
much. But it's for sales, or it's for employees, or it's for sending links, or it's whatever it has to be. But that's also a way I store stuff in a way.
Okay. I love that. I haven't had very many people on here that do the time blocking. I've gone in and out of doing it. Like sometimes I do it religiously, and it's like everything in there. Have you ever heard? Do you know who is it Corcos? The Levels. I still have a whoop on, so you might know what Levels is. Levels is like the CGM that you can wear that gives you insights into your glucose monitoring.
Oh, that's cool.
Anyway, he was on with Tim Ferriss, and he said like completely throw out your to-do list, and you should only use your calendar for task tracking and goal planning. It's interesting. It's a good one to listen
Yeah.
to if anyone's
I
listening.
I used to have like a to-do list, and I would keep it digitally, but I used to have one, and I got rid of it. I just use the calendar. And if I don't get stuff done, I move it. And, if I get it done, I either delete it, or I move it up, or the time just goes by it. So it all works pretty well. And it's also a good way to like keep a history in a way.
I was gonna say I try really hard. If I should get back into doing it, because I feel like when you do it too, I don't know if you feel this way, Peter. I noticed if it's in the calendar and I keep a good job of even updating my calendar when something takes too long, it's not only good history of what you spent your time on, but it also teaches you how long things take. So like I run an ecom agency, and there's times where I think something should take me an hour and it actually took me two. That doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you're juggling a bunch of meetings and deadlines, it's good to know like, oh no, that thing's gonna take me 2 hours next time, and to schedule it. I found the same thing, and you never drop any balls. That's the cool thing. If you put everything in the calendar, 0 balls get dropped at all. It's all there.
No,
Yeah, man. Cool.
I'm with you. I'm with
I
you.
appreciate it. Well, I know we're up at time. Peter, thank you so much. For people listening who want to try the product, buy the product, how can people follow along with you guys and the brand, and ultimately, be more involved?
Yeah. Yeah. So our relatively new, as in last summer, site is earthstore.com. So it's that online store. It's mostly made for B2B, but we have, a few hundred customers who are just buying D2C on it. It's very easy to use, has all of our products stocked. And then the best place to follow along is probably our Instagram, which is still Earth Cups. It's the original name, original product. That's what you see the most of. So at Earth Cups on Instagram or all of socials, and then earthstore.com is our site.
Love it. All right, Peter. Well, appreciate it, man. Thank you for the time. It's great to get to meet you and learn more about your story. And let's stay in touch, and best of luck.
Thanks, Shane. I appreciate it. A lot of fun.